Hi Student Success, this is your lecture video for Chapter 2. So for Chapter 2, I'm going to go ahead and open the text link. However, I'm actually going to rely mostly on these two sets of slideshows in order to really walk through the content of the chapter, and then I'll just kind of allude to the textbook toward the end. So Chapter 2 talks a lot about just motivation, organizing, space, time, energy. And so we're going to start with the staying motivated. So I want to look here, and this is just going to kind of walk us through because, as I mentioned in the Chapter 1 lecture video, that motivation plays a really big role in overall student success and student completion. And so Chapter 2 focuses quite a bit on this. So motivation really does fall on ourselves, and sometimes we really have to push it harder in some classes than others. And there's intrinsic and then there's extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic, think extrinsic, is external. It's outside of yourself. So it's things like grades, money, job, recognition, and it's fine to have external, that extrinsic motivation. However, if you don't also have that intrinsic or internal motivation, it's really not going to help. You need to have that drive within, the desire to do well, the desire to accomplish a goal. Everything kind of comes from that. And so we are tempted sometimes to blame outside factors for our lack of motivation, whether it's like, I don't like the class, I don't like the teacher, I don't understand why I have to do this. But really, we still have to be responsible for that motivation piece. And so one part of motivation is goal setting. And so setting goals, long, midterm, and short-term goals, all help kind of make sure that you have something to work toward. So I'm recording this on, early in the year. New Year's resolutions, right? We tend to set goals at the beginning of the year around things like healthy eating, healthy living, whatever the case might be. But we need to be doing that every new semester as well. And so having really defined goals every time we start a new semester, or every time we start a new class, or whatever we start something new, it's great to have these goals. So our textbook does say, jot down 3 goals you'd like to reach within that semester. So some short-term goals. However, we want to make sure that we're doing so in a way that is smart. There's an acronym, SMART goal setting. Our textbook refers to it. This slide uses some of it. But if you ever go and just kind of Google SMART goals, you'll see what it is I'm referring to here. So, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And our slideshow here does kind of hit on a couple of those things. So for instance, I always tell students, like, okay, let's set a goal at the beginning of the semester. And they say, like, I want good grades. Okay, that is a good goal in theory. However, it's not very defined. What is good to you might not be good to the next person, or vice versa. And so you want to have a very specific, I want to have a 3.4 GPA. That's more specific, right? Is it measurable? Well, putting a number on it in itself allows it to be measurable, but are there other ways that you can measure it? Are you measuring at your attendance? How many classes have you missed out of the semester so far? If you're doing grades, so making sure that you can measure it. Is it realistic? If you're taking 5 classes and it's your first semester and you're also working and you also have kids, is a 4.0 realistic? I mean, only you know your ability, but you also don't want to make sure that you are overextending yourself. So you want to make sure you're setting realistic goals, and that does not mean lowering expectations. It just means setting them as in a way to make sure that you are putting yourself up in a position to reach those goals. And which leads to, can you adjust the goals? Absolutely. Sometimes students feel defeated because they didn't reach their goal. Well, that's why you want to go back and evaluate them. Set your GPA goal, as I'm using that as an example, begin the semester, and a couple weeks in, be like, you know what? This A&P class is way more difficult than I thought it would. Instead of getting a B, I'm going to allow myself to go ahead and get a C in this class. And that's totally fine. You want to be able to adjust those goals based on information that you learn as it comes in. Some other types of goal setting, we have short-term, intermediate, and long-term. So short-term would be, I always like to say short-term goals are like the month or the next couple months. Sometimes that encompasses a nice semester time frame. So I will often use a semester as a short-term goal. Intermediate is more maybe a whole academic year, fall and spring semester, maybe if you're doing summer as well. And then long-term, you have multiple years. And so I always like to say, start backward. Start with your long-term goal. So if your long-term goal is to earn a bachelor's degree, then you work your way back. What's your intermediate goal? Well, your intermediate goal might be to get a 2-year degree first to build toward that bachelor's. Your short-term goal then is to pass all your classes. So you kind of like see how they can build on one another. Process goals are also things that you do, what it sounds like, in the process. You don't always necessarily want to have like just end goals. You want to have little goals that how you're going to reach that. So they're using this example of like learning French. So short term, learn 10 new words every week. So process goal would be to make vocabulary cards, because that is the process through which you will meet your goal. So how are you going to get there? I always like to tell students, it's great to have goals, but if you don't put action behind them, they're just dreams. Like goals, you're putting in the work to reach those particular things you have set for yourself. They can be set at different levels. So maybe thinking of like a challenging goal, a really realistic goal, and then an easy goal. Sometimes just doing that can help your motivation as well. If you have a lot of little goals and you can knock those out, then it helps you kind of build that confidence as you go to meet maybe more challenging goals. And also remember to factor in different things. Again, like your other influences, your other expectations and responsibilities, those all play a role in your academic goals that you might set for yourself. Other things to kind of help yourself get motivated. Depending on what classes you're taking, you're going to have maybe research papers or projects, things like that, where it's just going to be so much easier for you to break it into small pieces. It's very overwhelming to have like, oh, you have a 5-page paper due in a month, or 10-page or 20-page, however many, would be overwhelming for you. Well, of course it is, but if you break it up into pieces, like, okay, these next 3 days, I'm going to work on brainstorming my topic. After that, I'm going to work on brainstorming my thesis and start gathering sources. From there, I'm going to write my outline. So you can kind of break it up into those smaller chunks. 5-minute rule is where you say work on something for 5 minutes, and normally then you keep going. I kind of trick myself into that sometimes. I will say like, okay, I'm only going to, for instance, right now I'm deep cleaning my daughter's room. It's a nightmare. She's got lots of toys. And so I'll say to myself, I'm only going to work on this for 10 minutes and then I'm going to go do something else. Well, after 10 minutes, I'm like, no, I'm in a groove. I want to keep going. And so sometimes we can kind of trick ourselves into working for a little bit longer than maybe we anticipated or that we thought we could. Set goals for each study session or writing or reading session, whatever that might look like for you. Reward yourself. Maybe it's like, hey, if I write my paper, get it done, at the end, when I turn it in, I'm going to treat myself to a nice dinner. Or for me, sometimes it's, I'm going to work on something and then I'm going to like watch an episode on Netflix of something, whatever it is, whatever kind of motivates you, reward yourself. It's totally fine. And then seek help. I'm going to emphasize this all semester. You're paying for services at our college, utilize them. No one can get through a whole degree program without using some kind of help, whether it's a person or a resource, an office, a book, a website, I don't know what it is, but seek help when and if you need it. Some other suggestions for staying motivated. This goes back to that internal and external motivation. So, a sense of pride might be your internal motivation. And then maybe like, hey, I want to be able to share with my family that I passed this semester. So maybe allowing yourself to be recognized. Add a variety of different things to help kind of your study methods stay up. Make sure that you're maybe just varying up the time of day you study unless, and we're going to talk about this next, unless a certain time of day works best for you. Maybe work with other people. Keep a schedule. This is really important. So I'm going to allude to the fact that when I was going through my doctoral program several years ago, I also had 3 very young children. And so for me, I always said I wanted to work on my doctoral studies at least 1 hour a day. Okay. Well, for me, that happened to have to be at like 5 in the morning because it was quiet. No one was quite up yet. And so I would get up, around 4:45 and I would read and write and get all of that done. And I kept that schedule for several months because it seemed to work. So keeping a schedule really is important for that consistency. Talk to yourself nicely. Sometimes we are very quick to give ourselves kind of criticism, but be positive with yourself and give yourself breaks in between tasks. We have very short attention spans. Even right now, you might already be zoning out. So some other things for if you start to feel your motivation kind of waning and you're going to feel that way, maybe a couple weeks into the semester, check back in with those goals. I like to put Post-it notes where I can see them. and reminds me of little things. I mentioned, it's around the top of the year here. So my goal is always, I seem to have the same goal every year, like eat healthier, right? Eat a little healthier. And so sometimes I'll put little Post-it notes like in the pantry or on the fridge and be like, doesn't a carrot sound better than chocolate? I mean, no, it never does. But it helps me kind of remind myself of the goal. Add more choices to your life, connect your schoolwork to your life, ask for help. Don't hibernate, meaning don't ignore, don't push back, don't procrastinate, and prioritize. Sometimes we just have to tell people no, or maybe just not right now. When you're in school, it should be ideally one of your top priorities, not necessarily the top priority, excuse me, but a top one, within your top 5 or so. And so sometimes you might have to say no to things because you need to focus on your work. And then finally, kind of just tracking your motivation. When do you seem to feel like it's faltering? What factors impact your motivation? Is it a certain group of people? Is it a certain class? Is it a time of day? And just kind of make those adjustments based on that. All right, so the next part of our chapter talks about organizing up here, our space and time. So the first thing is your actual physical space. So at my home, I do have like a home office, and I feel like it is a nice place for me to really focus. Sometimes I will take my computer up in my kitchen and then everyone is around, right? So that is really easy for me to be distracted when things are going on there. So if you have a dedicated space in your house, great, use it. If you don't have a dedicated space, either make one or make the time. And so maybe your study time needs to be in the morning or late at night when there's not a lot of activity in your home. But you do need to have like an academic space. Some textbooks will say you should never study at home because you are easily distracted. You need to put clothes in the washer, you need to let the dog out. You should always go to like a coffee shop or campus or a library. I understand that that's not always realistic. Believe me, I certainly cannot get up and leave every time I need to complete a task. So that's why it's important to find a space in your home that's going to work for you, because it does create the atmosphere that you need to be focused. Some other things you can help to kind of prevent distractions while you're in that study space. Again, choose a place that you're going to associate with being productive. It's going to be available whenever you need it, whether it's just like a corner of a room somewhere in your house. It's going to meet your needs somehow. And maybe you need to talk to the people you live with saying, hey, like this part of the dining room table, I need to just have for schoolwork. Can you support me in this? So make sure that it is free of distractions. You're not up in your bedroom reading in your comfy chair because obviously you're going to like fall asleep, or you're not really close to a TV because it's going to draw your attention away from your studies. Plan for breaks in that space. Again, that part about we are easily distracted and we have short attention spans. Build in breaks and just prepare for human interruptions. Things are going to distract you. Just kind of build it in and know that that's going to be part of the process. Whenever you are trying to study, we want to make sure that we are not multitasking. And there's a lot of research that's coming out of MIT in particular in the last decade that says multitasking actually really taxes our brains. It may feel like we're getting a lot done, but actually we're doing things less effectively and we're forgetting what we do. So we really want to single task things because it does take longer to do multiple things at the same time. When we're shifting our attention from one thing to the next, it is more difficult for us to kind of keep up with that. So we want to make sure that we single task. And again, this is for academic purposes. I know a lot of us, we might be making dinner while also watching TV or talking to our kids while we're also sending an email. That's more personal multitasking. For academics, we want to single task. It's the way that we are going to get the highest quality work. We're going to be more focused and more productive and efficient. And then finally, we want to make sure, again, we're thinking about those interruptions, and part of that is time management, making sure that we are managing our time. We're keeping a schedule. We have time blocked out every day or every other day. One thing that students sometimes do is they build into their schedule like time they'll be in class, but they don't build in time that they need to study, and that's just as important. Making sure that, again, you have that right place and time. And one of the things I like to do before I have to sit down for a task for a long time is I call it a brain dump. I get like a piece of paper out and I write down all the things that I'm thinking of that needs to be done after I'm done with this academic task. So I'm like, all right, I need to go upstairs and I need to place the grocery order. I need to do the dishes. I need to, you know, make this phone call. And that way I know that I will attend to it later. But for right now, my focus needs to be on what's going on in front of me. All right, so in our textbook, as I've mentioned kind of in my welcome video, not everyone will need every piece of information as it relates to our chapters. And so I will encourage you to take a look at chapter 2 and just really dig in where you think you need the most help. If you feel like you're good with goal setting, maybe really try to look at the section that talks about time management, you know, or vice versa. I want you to just invest the time that's going to be most beneficial for you. All right, and that is chapter 2. See you next time.